My name is Brian Wombold. I worked at Maritime Paper till 2011, and then I retired. I brought in 2 medals that my father, Theodore Wombold, got from the war. There was 2 pins from his uniform and a pay book that my daughter had for him.
The Royal Canadian Ordnance Corps provisions soldiers with the material goods required to sustain war efforts, from clothing and blankets to ammunition and vehicles. Originated in 1871 as the Canadian Stores Department, by 1907 most duties were transferred to the newly organised Canadian Ordnance Corps. During World War I, the Corps grew in strength to support an estimated 400,000 Army personnel, including over 25,000 horses. It earned its royal designation from King George V in 1919. Fueled by exemplary service in the First World War, the Ordnance Corps' strength grew to 35,000 members. The department's responsibilities during World War II were varied and vital. In addition to procurement, it managed major and minor equipment salvage, mobile bath services, and laundry facilities. When Land, Air and Sea Forces merged in 1968, the RCOC reorganized to form the Canadian Forces Logistics Branch. 50 years later, it was designated the Royal Canadian Logistics Services by Queen Elizabeth II.
Brian, welcome to Militaria, and I was wondering if you could just explain to us what you brought today.
And no problem. The 2 medals that my dad got in the services, the only military picture I have of my dad, and a pay book.
I noticed when I looked into the pay book there that he started his career in the military in the Halifax Rifles. And the first entry in that book is to Rifleman Wombold as opposed to Private Wombold. It's reinforced by this picture here. That field service cap is a dark color, which was worn by rifle regiments, and this white metal is a white metal Halifax Rifle cap badge. For some reason, he decided that life would be better not in the Rifles and in the Ordnance Corps, because the next entry in the pay book, he's a private, so he's transferred over to the Ordnance Corps for the remainder of his time in the service. The Ordnance Corps was responsible during the war for supplying and maintaining and issuing all forms of material for the Canadian Army, whether it be ammunition in this case, or it could have been issuing trucks, or it could be issuing trousers. Until 1944, they were also responsible for repairing all of this. The Corps branched into 2. The Royal Canadian Electrical Mechanical Engineers split off, and they were then responsible for repairing everything. The Ordnance Corps stayed looking after the supply aspect of it. Your father was in supply issuing. You have 2 collar badges to the Royal Canadian Ordnance Corps. The joke for the combat arms soldiers is that the cap badge of the Ordnance Corps has ammunition that's too big for the gun that's on the badge. So basically saying that the Ordnance Corps doesn't know what they're doing and they'll give them the wrong things. Without the Ordnance Corps in the Second War, or even in peacetime, the Army cannot function. And the Army is just not a guy with a rifle at the front. It's multiple layers. Without one of those little cogs, the machine does not work. As I understand, your father was posted in Halifax at the Bedford Magazine. The pay book shows his increase in rank as he moved up the rungs in the military, and the last one I saw there was a lance sergeant, so he would have been in a supervisory position for a number of men working in the magazine at the time, so he never went overseas. That's why there are no other medals, and there's no clasp on the Canadian Volunteer Service Medal for overseas service. That's no different than anyone else that served in Halifax through the war. There was a garrison here, the artillery was here, the signals were here, there was infantry guarding here. A lot of soldiers that spent their time throughout the war here in Halifax doing what was required, because Halifax was an important target with the naval base here, and the Army had to defend the Navy. It's an aspect of the war that we don't spend a lot of time talking about. We seem to focus on the Army overseas, what their contribution was and their hardships and what they did, getting the glory and risking their lives, and gloss over the fact that there was a huge administrative tail that was required to keep them going and keep them equipped. That's not always talked about, especially back in Canada. You said that after the war he stayed on at the magazine and was a civilian employee there. Did he ever mention the explosion, the second Halifax explosion that happened at the magazine?
Never mentioned that.
I was curious whether he was there or how it would have impacted his life.
No, he did not talk about that one.
Everyone in Halifax always knows about the Halifax explosion that happened in the First World War. In the Second World War, we had the second Halifax explosion. So the second Halifax explosion was the one that occurred the evening of the 18th, 19th of July, 1945. The Bedford magazine is on the Halifax harbor. There was a barge there that probably had ammunition on it. It was tied up alongside. It caught fire. The fire spread to the magazine. Ammunition exploded, shells were sent flying everywhere, and it could have been a lot worse if it was not for the quick action of those on staff there and the local fire departments that put out the fire. The good thing was that because we'd had the first explosion, there was evacuation plans in place, warnings went out, and there was only one person that was killed as a result of the explosion. Brian, thank you so much for bringing these wonderful artifacts in and telling us what you know about them. What are your plans for these artifacts?
The picture with the medals and the pins,
Yeah.
they are going back to my grandson.
Right.
My youngest daughter, she's the one that told us she had the pay book, so that will go back to her, and then she can keep that for her memory of my father, her grandfather.
Yeah. Once again, thanks a lot for coming in, and it was a pleasure to look at these artifacts.
You're welcome. I did learn quite a bit. I didn't realize where Dad was stationed, so I learned that, and some things about his rank, I did not know that, so it was good to learn. I don't think there was any major surprises. Nobody come out with any hidden valor medals that I didn't know about, so no, he was just Dad, and that was it.